If you'd made a bingo card last January for how you thought Donald Trump's first year back in office would go, I imagine there are a few squares that you would have made sure to put on it, like lots of unhinged middle of the night Truth Social rants and lots of time off spent golfing. You could have bet on all those things. But then there were some things that you probably didn't think to put on that bingo card, like him taking a literal bulldozer to the White House. Or maybe you did predict that, and if so, I guess good for you. But do you know what was certainly not on my bingo card? Maybe it was on yours, who knows? Two of MAGA's biggest diehards, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert, publicly breaking away, at least to some degree on some things, from their beloved leader. Now, they are for different reasons, and neither is exactly embracing Democratic policies either. But these two congresswomen built their entire identities around being among Trump's most loyal foot soldiers. But here we are, 1 January later, and that loyalty appears to have run out to some degree, to different degrees perhaps. Now, back in November, both Greene and Boebert publicly defied Trump by supporting a measure to force a House vote to release the Epstein files. But it actually hasn't even ended there. I mean, this week, Trump vetoed a bill that was set to score Boebert a major drinking water project in her district. And she responded by yet again publicly defying him. I mean, that one is for her own political survival, but still. And as we've seen play out over the past few weeks, after, among other things, Trump called Marjorie Taylor Greene a traitor, she has transformed into one of the most fervent Republican critics. I mean, at least Trump critics, I should say. Now, whether Boebert and Greene's newish defiance of Trump turns out to be long-lasting or a sign of a bigger trend remains to be seen. But they do make one thing clear, that there are certainly cracks taking shape in the MAGA coalition, for even different reasons. In an interview with the New York Times, Greene had this to say about her loyalty to Donald Trump. I was just so naive. And she suggests that she isn't the only one waking up to that naivete. They, meaning Trump's White House, have major problems, and it's only starting to build. That was Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, joining me now is New York Times journalist Robert Draper, who just released a lengthy profile of Marjorie Taylor Greene based on years of interviews. It was really so interesting to watch. It's great to see you, to read. It's great to see you. Because you kind of go back to talking to her years ago when she was just a fervent, at times even defensive defender of Trump. And now she seems to have evolved quite a bit. But reading your piece, it's a little bit more nuanced than I think a lot of people think out there. Tell us what your take is on her evolution here.
Sure. Well, for starters, Jen, you have it right that at a time when many people in the Republican Party were wanting to move away from Trump, Marjorie Taylor Greene arrived in Washington just as he was departing it, saying the party is still Donald Trump's. He's not going anywhere. The party remains in his grip. And she really remained this kind of lonely voice on Capitol Hill as this avid cheerleader of Trump. She did say to me that over the years, I mean, she had certain misgivings about the way people could be so worshipful of him. She liked him personally, was supportive of his policies, but she thought it was a bit gross that a lot of people in the MAGA community looked at him as a godlike figure. She was uncomfortable with the sexualization of that you would see at Mar-a-Lago, and that she thought that represented a poor sort of role model for young ladies like their daughters. But she still was very much in Trump's camp and very eager to get to work in the beginning of 2025 when Trump, when the Republican Party ran the table. Mm-hmm. But that's when things started to fall apart piece by piece.
Now, a lot of people, I mean, I guess some hopeful Democrats saw her standing with the Epstein victims who were survivors, who were incredibly inspiring, and thought, oh, maybe she's going to become one of us. Yeah. That's not the case either, though.
That's not going to happen. No, I mean, it's, she had always been, very much against sex trafficking, very vocal on that subject. When she met some of Epstein's victims in a closed meeting of the House Oversight Committee hearing, she really, could see that this was not an act. No one was putting them up to this. This was not an opportunity to sell a book or something like that. And she was really touched by that. And meanwhile, she couldn't help but notice how Trump was so fervent in his opposition to releasing the files, and he finally screamed at her on the phone, and everybody in her office could hear it. And he said to her, according to Greene, my friends will get hurt if I release the files. And she basically said, what about the women? Don't you want to meet the women? Why don't you bring them to the Oval Office? And he said words to the effect of, they're not worthy of it. And that was a very clarifying moment for her.
I just mentioned Lauren Boebert, too. It's just a little bit of a different scenario, I think. I mean, it was a water project in her district. It seems to be an issue with the governor and sending a message, which is completely inappropriate, but it's more of a local political issue in some ways. Do you think, but Marjorie Taylor Greene also in your piece, and I just read this, sort of gave a bit of a warning out there that the Trump White House is in trouble. Do you think this is a part of a trend of more Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene for different reasons, or is this sort of a one-off for a range of reasons?
Well, no and yes, I guess. I mean, you can still count on one hand how many elected Republican officials who are not, say, from the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party, or really, I guess, any wing of the Republican Party, are out there criticizing Trump. I mean, there are very few and far between. I do think, though, that we are seeing a weakening of his stranglehold over the party. And we're hearing more and more people define for themselves, not waiting for President Trump to do it, what it means America first, what MAGA means. And that suggests that already just at the end of his first year, he's already kind of a lame duck, and people are looking to 2028.
Yeah, a lame duck after a first year. You've been covering presidential politics a long time. It's quite fast to be kind of a version of a lame duck. The other thing I thought was interesting, there's a lot of interesting things in your piece, and we'll repost it. I'm sure a lot of people have already read it, but was what she had to say about Mike Johnson. And this has struck me, is he's sort of given over power to Trump. That's not normally the role any Speaker of the House, including from the same party of a president, does. She's been pretty vocal about that. Others have been. Nancy Mace. What do you make of that? What do you think that means for Mike Johnson?
Well, I think that I mean, yes, she's not the first to suggest that the House has become a wholly owned subsidiary of the executive branch under Donald Trump with Speaker Mike Johnson. But she certainly has been a vocal critic of his. They've never gotten along. And I think that, she had hoped that the legislative branch would codify all of these sort of sentiments of Trump that have been expressed in executive orders. Because as Greene said to me, this isn't in the story, but she said, he's going to be a temporary president. Even his ballroom is going to be renamed something else. The Kennedy Center will be renamed something else because none of this has been enacted into law. And she puts that as much on Johnson as she does on Trump.
Robert Draper, I'm always happy when I see that you've written a piece, and hopefully it's not been someone I'm working for, because then there's always going to be interesting details in there. But it was really a compelling piece. Thank you so much for being here.
It was my pleasure, Jen.
All right, we've got to take a very quick break. But up next, Trump just chickened out on his signature economic policy once again. The Wall Street Journal, of all outlets, had some things to say about that. We'll be right back.